Welcome back. After lengthy arguments before the state Supreme Court, the stakeholders in the lawsuit challenging the state's legislative districts have all submitted their own proposals. That includes new maps from the governor, state lawmakers, and conservative and liberal law firms. Now, Marquette University fellow John Johnson created an analysis of these different maps and joins us now. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So in a broad sense, how do these maps compare to one another?
So yeah, 7 maps were submitted. The Supreme Court ruled they wouldn't consider the Pietering map because he wasn't one of the original petitioners. So that leaves us with 6. They're all drawn to meet the constitutional requirements of meeting the correct population balance, being contiguous, that kind of thing. But there are quite a bit of variation around the other criteria that the court put forward. No single plan performs the best across all metrics.
So I understand there are a few redistricting metrics, things like compactness of the districts and contiguity, which is one of the things that the court is holding firm to here. You can also evaluate the districts on racial balance as well. How are these maps faring on that racial balance issue?
Yes, so that comes down to federal civil rights law that requires there to be a specific number of minority opportunity districts in the state legislature. The way most of the plans handle that was just sort of matching the existing map in those districts, which are all in the city of Milwaukee. So there's not a lot of variation in the plans on that. There is some more variation in how frequently they split municipalities, counties, and wards. By my count, the Will plan submitted by the conservative law firm Will splits the fewest municipalities and counties, though the Law Forward plan is right behind it, submitted by a liberal firm, and the Law Forward plan splits fewer wards than the Will plan. So it'll be up to the court to sort of separate out which of these metrics they care more about. Of course, the partisan balance is very different across the plans submitted by conservative or liberal petitioners.
Yeah, so that's perfect. I was just going to ask, the justices say that they would factor in that partisan balance in their decision. How do these maps fare along that partisan breakdown?
Well, the plan submitted by the legislative Republicans has essentially the same partisan balance as the existing map. They took a least change approach to this latest version that they proposed, really just cleaning up the contiguity issues and leaving it otherwise unchanged. So you see a very pronounced Republican advantage there. Expected them to get 64 out of 99 seats in the assembly based on the election that happened in 2022. The Will plan cuts that by 5 or so seats, the Republican advantage, but does leave a Republican advantage there. And the other plans all create maps where Democrats have a very realistic chance of winning a majority of the assembly in a year where they do well statewide. Now, I tried to measure what would have happened in the 2022 election. We can all think back and remember that a couple years ago. That was a year when, as has often been the case, Republican state legislative candidates did quite a lot better than most of the statewide Republican candidates. And so when I use a statistical model to try to understand what would have happened in 2022 had we used any of these maps, my model thinks it's more likely than not that Republicans would have kept at least a 1-seat majority in the assembly under these proposed remedial maps, although some of them are very close and it's a near toss-up. Of course, 2024 is going to be a much different election year than 2022, I think. The electorate is larger in a presidential year, and if there's a more competitive map, it might be the case that the Democratic Party attracts more successful candidates with better funded campaigns. I'll leave that to the listener to decide how much of a difference they think that might make. One useful thing for listeners to remember is that you might get a contested partisan primary in August out of this map. Some of the plans really significantly redraw the districts around the state, placing multiple incumbents in the same districts and drawing a number of districts with no incumbent at all. So if you're the sort of voter who doesn't always show up in the August primary because there's not much on your ballot, that might be different this year.
So now traditionally we kind of think of Tammy Baldwin 2018 size win as the metrics that Democrats would generally need to get a majority in the state legislature. Looking at some of these maps, what kind of win, what kind of analogy would it take for Democrats to recapture the state legislature?
Tony Evers-sized victory, looking at his 2022 reelection, that would probably deliver the assembly to the Democrats under any of these Democratic proposed plans.
Yeah, certainly interesting. A lot to look out for. John Johnson, thanks so much for joining us.